Joshua Hood is the author of Warning Order and Clear by Fire. He graduated from the University of Memphis before joining the military and spending 5 years in the 82nd Airborne Division. He was a team leader in the 504 Parachute Infantry Regiment in Iraq from 2005 and 2006, and a squad leader with the 508 Parachute Infantry Regiment in Afghanistan from 2007 to 2008, for which he was decorated for valor. In his time after the Army, he served his community as a sniper team leader on a full-time SWAT team in Memphis, where he was awarded the Life-Saving Medal, and he's also been, in the past, the Director of Veteran Outreach for the American Warrior Initiative. His new book, The TREADSTONE Resurrection, is a continuation of the Robert Ludlum series and will surely be a hit for both Ludlum and Hood fans. The crew has the honor and privilege of bringing you our interview with Mr. Josh Hood. All right, we want to welcome Josh to the show. Welcome, kind sir. Good to have you.
Welcome. Good to have you, Josh.
Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Still got to drive, so I'm drinking water.
All right. Leave it to us to do the drinking here. All right, so we're going to get right into it. So we're in the eve of your release of the TREADSTONE Resurrection. Can you tell us how you got tapped to be the writer to continue this Robert Ludlum series in the university that he created?
That is the $1 million question, and I still don't know. I still think that there was a mix-up somewhere, but the first I heard of it was Tom Colgan, the Kingmaker over there. He asked me if I would be interested in writing a Ludlum book, and I thought it was kind of a joke. I was like, yeah, sure. And so he kind of explained how it'd go, and he's like, hey, will you just, we're giving you basically carte blanche here. Just come up with a character, come up with how you would do it, and then write us 25 or 50 pages, and then send it in. And so, I followed his directions, and it was one of those things that I thought it was pretty good, but it kind of started out with this sense of foreboding, because I'm reading through it before I'm about to send it to him, and it was, I think, 3 chapters. And actually, it was Mark who pointed it out. He's like, man, that was pretty brave of you, what you did. And I was like, well, what did I do? He's like, well, you just shifted to present tense halfway through the second chapter. And I was like, oh, what? So I go back and read it, and I just had I don't know, a brain fart or something. But I wrote everything normal, and then second, chapter, we're in present tense. And he's like, I don't know if that's really going to work. And I was like, man, good call, bro. And so I fixed it, sent it in. They liked it. And, just been blessed from the beginning, everybody that supported me and allowed me to, expand in this way.
Wow, good to have friends in high places there, huh?
I don't know. Somebody somewhere is looking out for me, so I appreciate it.
So, Josh, although the Ludlum world is a familiar world, you introduced the readers to a new protagonist, Adam Hayes. So you can tell us kind of how you decided to create Adam, and then also, if you don't mind, how does Adam differ from Jason Bourne, which is really Ludlum's most famous character?
Yeah, and that was kind of the biggest thing that I had, and going into it is Jason Bourne. At his heart, he's an assassin, right? And my first thought was hey, the people who read this book are most likely going to think about the movies. They're going to have Matt Damon in there. And so you start with this scene where he's, got a gun to this guy's head, and the guy looks up and he's got a kid, and he kind of has this moment where he's like, I can't do this. And he gets shot in the head. And the books and the movie, we're learning basically that this dude was kind of a piece of shit. And, but, he doesn't, he's kind of realizing that as we realize that, and he feels bad about it. But with TREADSTONE, it was I can't do that, obviously. So how do you make a guy that is basically paid to kill people likable? Mm-hmm. And so my original thought was that the book would start at the end of the movie, kind of where TREADSTONE had just, they yanked the funding and it stopped. And so like I said, I just had my son at the time, and I was thinking like, what would like a professional assassin do with a super high like security clearance if all of a sudden he didn't have a job? Like, I'm pretty sure they don't have a 401k plan. You can't put like, who are you going to put on your references or whatever? And so I started to think about that a little bit, and I kind of wanted to have a little bit of the transition that I'd experienced, having a kid, getting out of the military, the family part, and bring that together with like a protagonist that wasn't like the typical protagonist where he's like, oh, he's just, tall, big guy, that drinks a lot, picks up all the women or whatever. Mm-hmm. I kind of figured that's what would be expected of a Bourne book is like, I look at Bourne kind of like the American version of James Bond. And I just kind of wanted to flip the script a little bit.
Oh, well done.
Yeah, it worked.
So I read a quote of yours some time ago. I think you were writing Warning Order, and you were tracking images of torture and crucifixion coming out of Syria. And the horror of those pictures and reports sparked this emotion. And I think you said someone has to pay for this. So is that part of what drives your subject matter, to use fiction to kind of right some of the wrongs in the real world?
I mean, I think fiction, for me personally, when I write, I want to have a moral. Like, why am I writing this book? And sometimes that's internal, but obviously, like, I think it's important for a reader to be able to be like, what's the point of this? And so, like, being in Iraq, Afghanistan, being a cop, like, I've been to a lot of the places and in a lot of the situations that we write about in this genre. And the strangest thing about transitioning from the military to being a police officer is over there, you don't understand what they're saying. But you go into somebody's house in like Memphis or somewhere in the United States, like, you understand what they are saying. And it brought a lot of things that I hadn't thought about into like the forefront of my mind. And so with that, it's just like, there's a lot, you don't really have, today's world, you don't have to look farther than the news to find an awesome plot for a thriller.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I do with all of them. It's just like, I'd like to show, what does a situation look like for a guy that's there, but might not have like this, same outlook where it's like, hey, we're wrapping ourselves in the American flag and everything, and everything's cool, like you see stateside, like, once you're over there, you get a different view. And I just try to bring that in a little bit as much as possible.
So speaking of the real world and its impact on your writing, Josh, you've spent a majority of your adult life either in the military or, like you said, as a police officer and a member of a SWAT team. And thus, you're right, you got a ton of real life experience to draw from. I mean, you lived a lot of the things that we write about. But are there moments in your past that you just won't touch and just can't open up and use in your stories?
I don't like, I found writing, especially as starting so soon after I came out of the military, Clear by Fire and Warning Order was very cathartic. And that's why I think I was lucky not to have suffered as much from PTSD, because I was writing about that and kind of digesting a lot of things right off the bat. And so, like, I try to use every aspect of what I've seen, felt, etc. In my books. And one of the things that a motto that I try to do is, self-critique, self-correct. And so I notice in a lot of my books, like, action comes real easy because it's just like, you just think, hey, remember that time that dude opened up on me with PKM? What did that feel like?
Yeah, right.
You sit there and write it down. And so for me, it's been very easy to use that as a crutch. And so I've tried to start going, I've always used, and will always use action as a character, but I want to go deeper into, the emotions, etc., of the actual characters. And I think that's what was lacking a lot of in my first two. And then I think that I was able to put a magnifying glass on that in Treadstone. We got a lot of action, but it was focused a lot on, Adam Hayes and what he felt like, what he was thinking, etc. And so, yeah, I think it's.
Do you find
It's
you
one or
finding
the
it
other.
difficult? Do you finding like you gotta dig deep for that, or like something you really need to work on, or is it starting now to like get a little bit easier? Like the action stuff was easy. Is this part getting a little bit easier?
I don't know. For me personally, I've never found like I can write a lot of bad writing easily, but it's I think as you go a little bit more, every book you start to raise the bar a little bit higher. And I've had like great mentors, guys like Mark Rainey, and they write at such a high level. Jack Carr, Brad Taylor, that this genre is just packed with talent. And Don Bentley's another one. And so it's always like there's never a time for me to feel like comfortable, because it's always like, all right, let's step it up another notch and try and get to that next level where they're at.
Yeah. Oof. You've you've written some, obviously written your own titles, and you've done some work as a ghostwriter or a co-writer in some other material. Do you find the process any different between when you're writing under your own name versus when you might be working with someone else? Do you find that, what do you find different about that?
Writing with someone else, or in some
For
cases,
someone else,
someone
or
else
yeah,
is really, really difficult. And it is because when I'm writing a story, it's internal, it's my ideas, which way I want to go. You write with or for someone else, and they just be like, no, I don't like that. You're like, well, which part? Like the whole middle part. I don't like it. Change it. You're like,
bite me.
yeah. And so, yeah, to myself, I was writing. I was like, no, that's the way I would do it. And so that's the way we're going to do it. But, you're writing for someone else. I can be like, chapter 7, I want a Volkswagen Beetle to show up, and I want a bunch of clowns with AKs to jump out. And you're like, okay. And not only you have to do it, but you got to sell it. And so you learn a lot, but it is, for me, that is definitely like one of the hardest things that I've done.
So let me ask a question on that. Is part of the difficulty of that, and I think about this from my own perspective. I don't consider myself a huge ego person, but I also think it would be really hard for me to sit at home and watch people praise the guy whose book I just pretty much delivered, so to speak. Is that part of the difficulty too, is not being able to go, hey, that was me?
Well, I was lucky, I would say, air quote, to have like the ego stomped out of me right away with the first 2 books, because like, a lot of people liked them, but like, they weren't commercial blockbusters. They weren't like, we weren't cashing checks on those. And so like I had to go through a lot of, because when I first started writing, I'd always wanted to be a writer, but I was honestly kind of scared of it, because you want something really bad. It's kind of like, what if I fail or whatever?
Yeah.
So actually, a funny story, when I enlisted in the military right out of college. I had a bachelor's degree in English, but I wanted to go to the infantry, etc. So I just went ahead and enlisted. And if you have college, you go into the military as a specialist or an E4. Yeah. And they call you an Insta-4. And so you got some guys who've been like there for like 3 years, and they're just now getting specialists, and you just show up like so cherry, you got the stem still coming out, and they're like, And so my squad leader was one of these people. And back when I went to the 82nd, they allowed a training method called hazing, which they don't utilize anymore, but back then,
I remember that.
was the way that you got a soldier to, toe the line. And anyway, so my squad leader, he and I didn't get along right away. And so he asked, well, you got a degree, what an idiot, and blah, blah, blah. And so we went to Iraq and Afghanistan, and we became friends, but he got out. I still had some time. And during this time, we had talked about writing, about, all this stuff. And I get a call, like literally, I'm out of the military not very long. Get a call from this dude, and he's like, "What's up, bro?" And I'm like, "Hey, man, I haven't heard from you." And he's like, "I just wanted to let you know I just graduated with my MFA." And I'm like, "Oh, I
Nice.
didn't know that." He's like, "And I just published my first book." And I was just like, "Dude, are you serious?" And so I'm Googling it straight up. He's got a book. And I was like, "Mother." So right then I go get my laptop, and I'm like, if this dude can do it, I can do it. So I go get it, start writing, etc. You know, go through like, I think I had 82 rejection letters.
Oh, that's a nice number.
Nice.
Your 82nd rejection letter.
It was one of those things. I was like, the next one's got to be me. And after that, I got published, and then the other stuff happened, and it was like, I thought I'd made it. I thought I had this golden ticket. I was like, dude, you get published? I mean, you know, it'll be
Yeah,
like,
that's it, man. You're rich.
and, you know, right. You know, slamming Cadillac goes and whatever. And that didn't happen. And so I was kind of left spinning. And you see me naturally look at some of the other guys that I started with, because I started writing and got published at the same time Matt Betley did. So we knew each other pretty well. We still know each other. Dude's a phenomenal writer, and he's had a lot of really great success. And so, you know, I assume that I'm going to follow his trajectory, and it didn't happen. And so right then, you know, I kind of like got the boo-boo lip and whatever, but that was kind of like my period where the ego was just kind of crushed out of me. And it was kind of like, hey, dude, if you go into this like doing it for any other reason than you want to do a good book, it's the wrong reason, and you're always going to be unhappy.
Yep. That's for sure.
Your 82nd rejection and the 82nd Airborne just made me think you're probably glad you're not in the you weren't in the 505th.
Yeah.
Been a little more hard to get to.
Well, it was, you know, I'd come up with like a list of like agents, and I think I'd gotten like every agent available. And so literally there were 82 agents on there, because I got to the bottom, and then I was like, well, start over. And so I went back to the first guy that had rejected me, sent the same letter, the same everything. And he's like, oh, I love this book.
That pisses you off.
I would have thrown something through the window.
Dude, I mean, at that point, I'm just so happy that,
Right.
you know, it could have been like, I thought I was going to be writing ransom notes for the rest of my life or something.
So, Josh, tell us about your growth as an author from when you did Clear by Fire to now with the Treadstone book coming out. What's been your career, not your career growth, but your growth really as just a wordsmith?
I think for me, it's the nuances that I think is that, you know, when I first started out, it was longer sentences, you know, just really long sentence. And I think there was a lot of me, I guess, in it. And you look at guys like Michael Conley, like you look at Mark, you look at any of the real good writers, John Grisham, and you can't tell that they're writing that book. There's no like hint of their voice or their narrator. It's just a clean book. Mm-hmm. And so getting to that point has been challenging. And then, you know, then you start there's always something to learn. It's like golf. It's like, you know, hey, maybe how do I chop up the sentences a little bit to like ramp up, you know, the pace, the action, or, you know, slow it down here. And it's just, I think I've gotten better at a few things, but it's always, for me, it's like, I don't think there's a retirement home for like authors. Like you just keep doing it until you die, and then you're like, yeah, that's as good as I could have gotten.
Then you get famous, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I think I've heard the expression, it was about screenplays, but it applies to a career or a manuscript, is scripts are never finished, they're abandoned. And I think that's probably true of pretty much everything in writing.
Yeah.
Your first creation, Mason Kane, had a really troubled background. His father had committed suicide. His mother was an alcoholic. And I know, I've read that you said that was a conscious choice so that the Army would have been a better choice for him regardless of the rest of his life. But I also know from what I've read and from what I've heard in interviews that that wasn't your childhood. Your father read you Tolkien when you were a kid. Your mother told you family histories, and both your parents really fostered and encouraged you and the creativity in you. So my question is, and this goes to process, how did you draw, or what did you draw from to create the impact that Kane's background had on him?
Well, my mom, like, she passed away a couple years ago, so it's like no big deal now, but she came from a very, very abusive childhood. She was one of 7 children, old school, like kind of a Catholic upbringing down in Texas and stuff. And so I grew up, like, my mom was very progressive about, getting the help she needed, and also, explaining certain behaviors. And she was a nurse. And so, when I would have a temper or whatever, she would see things that I guess she had seen growing up and be like, hey, that's not, normally you'd be like, hey, that's not good to get mad and throw something. But to her, it was like, she went back to growing up, and she's like, we don't do that because, like, A, because I say so, and because I don't ever want you to be the type of man that, like, her father was. And so I got to see from an early age, like, how, you had this nurture versus nature debate. And I've gotten to see it, especially a lot in the police department, is you see when you're on the streets how much a person's environment, like, especially at a young age, has a huge impact on who they're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always personally admired people that came from adversity, that came from these terrible things, and were able to, once they found structure or by sheer force of will, were able to, achieve this unimaginable success. And I think that, like, some of us look at, like, success with money or having a lot of stuff, but, like, for a person to go from a terrible upbringing to being a functional person, like, that you would never even know, like, that's a pretty amazing thing. And so that's where I got that from. And, the way it is now is, like, you have the anti-hero is very, very popular in fiction. You don't have a lot of, like, protagonists who are just, like, normal functioning dudes, like, and so it's
boring.
kind of, like, become part of the genre. Is like, you can't have, like, John Smith, like, he's a happy banker or whatever, and he loves his kid and his wife, and he just happens to kill people.
Yeah.
Or whatever,
It actually would be pretty cool, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, it's kind of like, I believe that, like, modern, what we write in now in the thriller genre is all character based, as opposed to, like, how it used to be where it's plot driven or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're seeing that a lot with, like, look at Bosch. Like, the series is known as Bosch. Like, some people don't even know who Michael Conley is, but they know who Bosch is. And so, like, to be successful, I believe now, you have to have that kind of character that has, like, the wheels to go 30 books or whatever. And to do that, you got to give them a ton of baggage.
Yeah, that's true.
So Josh, not most, but some writers, they write for someone, or they have someone in mind as they're writing it and reading it, be it mother, father, spouse, brother, sister. I personally, I kind of write for my brother, with him in mind as I'm writing stories. So who does Josh Hood write for, if anybody?
Josh Hood writes not to suck.
That's a given.
Yeah, he's on this show then now.
I'm getting a shirt made that says that for you, Josh. That's going to be your
like, that's
gift.
kind of my thing is, like, Elmore Leonard says, like, one of the keys to writing is, like, omit the part that people skip. Like, that's kind of what I do. Is I'm just like, man, this is boring. And sometimes, like, with Warning Order, it got me in trouble because, like, Warning Order, I was like, as I've matured as a writer, I look back at, like, some of Vince Flynn's stuff, and, like, the best scenes were the ones that I would skip past, like, where they're in the situation room and someone's messing with Mitch, and he's so angry, but he can't do anything. I'm like, oh my God, just go kill somebody. So I'd be skipping ahead. And that's what I did to, like, Warning Order. I was like, dude, this is just going to be balls to the wall, just smoking people. It's going to be awesome action and everything. And then like I look back at it and I'm like embarrassed because it's such a one-dimensional narrative. And, you know, I go back and I read these places that I used to skip over, and, you know, it's like Ben Coase told me once, he's like, you know, that's where the gold is in those like little conflicts. And he's right.
A lot of depth right there.
Yeah, there definitely is. So Josh, circling back to TREADSTONE Resurrection, Operation TREADSTONE might be a fictional thing that was created, but do you think there is an element of truth in that, and that our government might have similar type of programs?
What do you think, Mr. Bishop? I'm not answering that question on the unsecured comms.
Oh, that's what I want to know from. I want to know from the experts.
Eric's going to disappear tonight.
Yeah.
Nice
like,
to know you, buddy.
I didn't say any of that, Mr. NSA. Well, you know, I did a lot of research before I started writing, and I read a lot of old interviews with Mr. Ludlum, and I, you know, kind of found where he had gotten his source material, and a lot of it was based in, you know, the MACV-SOG, Phoenix program, everything, and, you know, that was in Vietnam. And then, you know, you kind of go from that to what we see over in, I mean, just take not too long ago when that drone zapped dude, like that didn't happen in a vacuum. So,
Right.
you know, yeah, I believe that there are perfectly legal, or, you know, there's an area like we don't want to go, but it's there. Let's just be honest.
Somebody needs to do it.
Sometimes we have to do stuff, and we have to have the capabilities to make it happen.
Exactly. And I think that's what all these books are, you know, it's like, we don't know exactly what it is, but we're pretty sure it's there. And so you kind of try to explore like how that would work. I mean, being a writer, in my opinion, is just like, you ask this question, what if there was some top secret government sanctioned hit squad? Like, how would that work? Would they have like name tags, or like how do you get money? Like,
ID.
Yeah, like how do you know, how would that work? And so like once I start going down that rabbit hole, like that's where kind of the story comes out, because you think, you know, very mundane things become very important in a situation like that.
Well, all right. So you are writing the next TREADSTONE-based book, Robert Ludlum. Is this a watershed moment for Josh Hood in his writing career?
It is a surreal watershed. I mean, to think that I would ever have my name below Robert Ludlum's is like, it still hasn't sunk in. I don't know if it ever will. And it's just, I mean, it's Robert Ludlum. Like,
right.
That's all you really got to say.
Awesome.
Did you get any sleep that night when you finally got the ink dried on that piece of paper?
I mean, mainly it was like, man, like, don't screw this up. No, it was one of those things where he built such a rich universe that it really, you know, you just kind of like plug into it. And the thing that like kept going through my mind as I was, you know, working on it is like, why the hell didn't I think of something like this? Like, why can't I thought of something like amnesia, an assassin with amnesia? Like, it's awesome. And so, you know, there was just such a rich field to pick from that it was just kind of, it was cool just to pick the dots, because for me, the TREADSTONE guys were always like the guys in the background doing all this stuff. But I personally wanted to know more about them the entire time. So it was kind of a perfect fit, because you don't really get to know anything about those guys.
Yeah.
You get to expand the galaxy now, which is pretty probably surreal for you, that as much as you admire that style and what Ludlum did, you now get to think, what's the next thing after amnesia? You're creating that. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I get to play with like the coolest toys too, because it's like these dudes are awesome. So it's not like, you know, I'm working with analysts or whatever, and it's, you know, he wrote a lot. He left a lot about how, like, you know, it would work. And then you have the movies, and they were like, well, how would you break somebody's mind? And So I started reading about, the CIA's MKUltra program, and I was like, this stuff really happened. I mean, this wasn't really fiction. And so now that was like back in the 60s and 70s. Like, what can they do now?
Did anybody ever tell you, hey boy, you got a little close to something, you might want to back off on that? Has anybody come to you with that yet?
No comment on that one.
don't
Does the
send
phone
your
ring
work.
at 2:00 in the morning and just keep
now Mike's going to disappear. It's going to be me and Chris doing the show next week.
We're not commenting, but I've been told that it's a very accurate portrayal on many things, including close to the Ludlum, what the Ludlum saw that universe continuing on to in the future.
Oh man, that's nice.
Don't send it to the DOD to look at.
Yeah, don't let.
So I want to get a little bit more about you, Josh. Early on, you were diagnosed with ADHD or ADD, I'm not sure which, and a learning disability. And as we've discussed, you're extremely busy with your own work, you ghostwriting, and you're a trusted reader to guys like Mark Graney, JT Patton. How have you learned to deal with the focus issues you were born with and the other obstacles to that sort of success?
Well, actually, for me, like ADD works perfect with writing in some aspects, but in others, it's like it works against it, because like if I'm interested in something, like I'm able to stay focused. I take Adderall like to balance my ADD, because when I'm writing, at least, because if I don't, it's like, hey, squirrel. And but at the same time, it's like, my mind works different. It's kind of always going in different directions. So I know when I'm writing, I'm on a chapter or whatever, and I feel myself starting to get bored. Like I assume like, hey, maybe the reader would get bored around this point too. Like, let's blow something up or let's change something. And so I think that's kind of helped me. It's like you have this internal like pacing dialogue that like, you hear snoring in the back of your head. You're like, all right, someone's got to die. So
I love that's your go-to, by the way.
That's my go-to in everyday life. So,
well, I mean, I told JT Patton, he asked me like, what should I do in this chapter or this chapter? And I was like, man, I got a rule. Like, if someone's not dying or getting blown up every 10 pages, like, it's kind of a boring book in my opinion. And
it's a thriller. Come on.
That's not for everybody, but that's how I try to roll. And, I try to scale back a little bit now, because you can have, those types of thriller moments in different ways. But when I was starting out, and if I get in a bind, I'm just kind of like, bring somebody in with a gun.
or drop an F-bomb, right?
Yeah, that's something I've really been working on. Like, there's not near as many F-bombs in that book as there was in Warning Order.
I actually read some reviews that people leave on others' books, and like on Amazon or something, and some readers get so turned off by that. So I always find it's like a delicate line. Like, do I have too many F-bombs in there, or not enough, or am I gonna piss off a reader because there's too many and they'll just close the book? Or
I think if they're offended by one, they're probably gonna be,
I guess so.
I can't imagine. Oh, they got 70 in there. Well, I was good with 69, but it's once they cross 70.
Well, according to JT in Warning Order, I had 720, which is apparently some kind of a record. And my mom had actually given the book to my pastor, and one day we
nice.
holding my book, and I'm like, oh my God, where'd you get that? He's like, your mother gave it to me. And so
Don't read it.
Give it back.
I was like, dude, no. And he'd already read it, but it was something that like I didn't realize I was doing, because that's the way we talked in the military and stuff. Right. But like 720 is a bit of a high number, and it's like, as I've kind of grown as an author, my wife is like, do you know any other words? Like, and I'm thinking in my head as I'm writing, yeah, he'd say F this, and this dude would be like, F you. But she's right. It's like, hey, change it up. You don't need to always use the F-bomb. And then, it becomes kind of superfluous. We got 720, like none of them really have any weight. Maybe the first one did, but.
Yeah. Well, where was your editor and all that? I mean, man, my editor would say, you have 3 of these words in this book. You got to get rid of them. I'm like, 72, 720.
I don't know.
I think it's all
That's
about. I think it's all about if it serves character and realism.
Yeah.
Then I'm either impacted or not. Like I have some mobsters in my work in progress, and they're not going to talk like choir boys. And if I cut that out, it's going to look pretty ridiculous.
Not authentic, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. But for me, it was like I had a few words, both curse words and other words that were kind of like my go-to things. And so now when I turn a book in right before I go, I search for like, hey, what's the word you use the most? And like for a while it was as. Like I would use as so much.
Oh, I know.
So then I was like, we're not using as. And so then you're like, well, how do I tell this sentence or write the sentence without using that? And so then you develop other kind of like training scars. And it's like, I think that's how you break through that ceiling where it's like, I'm so comfortable writing F-bombs and as, like a whole book of it. Nothing but that, sprinkle it in. And,
That's another T-shirt, by the way.
I was going to say a T-shirt.
yeah, so, when you get to a certain level, like, we've all read them, but some guys, they're just like masterful. And you're like, dude, he might have said like, he hardly repeated any word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like, how does that guy do that? And so that's the kind of thing that challenges me.
Yeah.
Reminds me of a conversation we had with the writing duo team, Andrews and Wilson, where they were talking about smirk.
Great, yeah.
They had one book where the reviewer was like, smirk, 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 smirk. Book sucks, smirk.
Well, it's crazy because like when you're in the weeds, like you don't know.
No, you don't see
you're
'em.
like on page 250 and you're writing it and you're like, God, I got so much more to do. And like you don't remember what you wrote the day before or a month before or whatever. And then
Yeah.
but they're reading it in like one sitting. And like if you read your own stuff in like one sitting, I'm pretty sure you'd be like, oh, you catch that. But like, most readers don't realize that like writing, the book is made in the editing, but by then, like when you're starting to get to the point where it's about to be published, you've read and edited it like 200 times and your brain's just like, yeah, that's totally right. You could be reading something that was like totally spelled backwards and your brain's like, I know what he meant. Don't worry about it.
or you cut something out, but your brain still has it in there. So you're like, oh, that has backstory. Oh, no, it doesn't.
Yeah, and that's like the worst thing in the world when you cut something and like your brain tells you it's still there. The editor's like, who is Tom?
Where the hell did this car come from?
7. He's got a jetpack. That seems awful. Where did it come from? And you're like, oh, I didn't take that out. I didn't take that out.
It's awesome.
Man, it's so true.
So I know some of the writers that we've talked to say no one reads their stuff until it's sent to the editor. And you mentioned you wrote the first 3 chapters before you sent it to Tom Colgan for the TREADSTONE book, and Mark Graney, helped you read it. So were you using any other like beta readers for TREADSTONE before you actually submitted it and finished it?
No, not really. I mean, I like, I'll send it to Mark or, JT I send stuff to and, just be like, hey, what do you think? And especially with this book, because it was kind of big. Like, it was kind of like, there was a lot riding on it. But I believe that, like, for me, it's like as I've written and done more and more, you get like you get a feel like, hey, this is good or this is not good. And then you kind of, for me, it's like I've worked with 3 different editors in the Big 5. And so I know what each one likes and what each one doesn't like. And so then, you get into a position where it's like, hey, is this more of a so-and-so book? Because I know he really likes these things, or this guy book. And so, like, I'll send it to Mark just to be like, hey, is this clean? Is this fresh? Or is it, is it maybe tired or whatever? Because he'll be real. And, like, a lot of the guys, like, I try to avoid people that would just be like, oh, it's great. Like, my wife, she's
Yeah.
like, oh, it's great. And I'm just like, okay.
Doesn't look up from her computer. Yeah.
Yeah, she's like, it's fine, just send it, whatever. Grey's Anatomy's on or whatever. And so I know like they'll shoot me straight, and I try to surround myself with people that are better than me. So like they're always pushing me, and it's like, hey, if this guy says it's legit, then I know it's legit. But when I sent it to him, I felt pretty good about it, minus the whole tent shift, which I didn't even notice. But he's always been like a very good resource. Like he's really busy, but he's always had time for me. And I've learned a lot just by watching Mark's work ethic. Like JT has like this catalog of stuff in his head. And you can ask, like, I'll call him and ask him a question, just be like, JT, I need to know money laundering, South China, 2018. And he'll be like, oh, you need to go check out this or this. And I'll be like, all right, cool, I'll go do it. And it's always right on. But
That's crazy.
like, I already need Google.
He is Google.
What a crew, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, those are good people, man.
Yeah.
Good people.
I called him last summer about closed circuit cameras. I was like, okay, I've got guys coming here. They need to hack into the system. How are you going to do that? He's like, well, you could make it really complicated. And he started talking. He goes, but instead just go really simple because no one will understand that. I'm like, thank you.
That's what I had to tell him one day is like, he was talking about something and I was like, whoa, like I asked what time it was and you're telling me how to build a watch. Just like, give me the just have A plus B equals C. That's all I need.
Yeah. Just talk to me like I'm 5.
Yeah. And he's just like, oh, okay. Well, so you don't want to know about the logarithm? I was like, no, I don't want to know about the logarithm.
Obviously, as writers, and we're all writers, we've always heard, and I think we probably all hold to the statement that to be a good writer, you have to be a good reader. So were you able to, with your time when you were deployed overseas, were you able to really dig in and have time during your operations to read? And if so, what did you pick up? Did you go to thrillers? Did you read different genres?
I've always been like a voracious reader. Like now I typically read like, I don't know, 4 or 5 books a month, maybe. Like I could usually finish 2 books a week. I like to read really quick. And over there we had, you would get like, they'd have these boxes where like everybody would get packages and like, they just kind of like, they call it like rat fucking. Like all the crap that they didn't want went in this like communal box, right? And it was like out in the hall. And so you'd find these books and like the books would like, you get there on a deployment and somebody have this brand new book. And then, by the end of the deployment, it looks like a stripper out on Bragg Boulevard. So, these guys just, I don't know, like people just send books. And so it was like, you just had always had whatever. So you just grab whatever's in the book. And like, actually that was the first time I'd read James Patterson. Somebody was a big James Patterson fan. And there was a James Patterson, I think it was like the Big Bad Wolf. And I was like, this dude's like legit. And one there was a Harry Potter. And like, there was nothing else to read. And so I read Harry Potter. And then like, no joke, there was like Jenna Jameson's like autobiography. By the time I got it, like there was no cover, so I didn't know what it was. I'm like, oh, cool.
That one's been out for a while.
Yeah, it was like, it was rough, but it was like, Jenna Jameson. This is not what I thought I was going to be reading. Like,
We're at page 10 and 11.
Yeah, there's like no pictures anymore. You're like pages stuck together. You're like, I just need to
Oh, man.
You knew more than you wanted.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So,
The joys of being deployed.
I know, like I'll notice, like I read a lot of nonfiction right now, but then I notice that nonfiction, the writing, the style, the pace, etc., it doesn't transition well to fiction. So, you have to also be careful about reading fiction because like all of a sudden someone else's great idea like finds its way into your book.
Yeah, you just wrote 6 months right into that book. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, you're not consciously ripping anybody off, but it's just so you got to be careful of that. And so it's like I try to get a wide variety just to fire up different parts of my brains. But I still like, man, I really love this genre. Just very honored and happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, amen to that. Hey, so what can you tell us about, in our audience, obviously, the American Warrior Initiative and the role that you played in that organization?
Well, AWI, or the American Warrior Initiative, it is a nonprofit by another great author, Sean Parnell.
Yep.
And it's sponsored by Fairway Mortgage. I worked as the director of veteran outreach, and man, they do such a great job.
Mhm.
Every time I talk about it, I still get kind of a little, misty eyed because the people at Fairway, Steve Jacobson, he is the owner, the CEO. Yep. You have Louise Thaxton, who is she works with Sean Parnell, or soon to be Congressman Parnell. I don't even know.
Let's hope so.
Anymore. That dude's like amazing. He's like, I'll write a couple books. I'll run for Congress. No big deal.
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever I feel like today. And it's one of the largest. Fairway's one of the I think it was like the 5th largest mortgage company. When I went there, they give a percentage. All the employees like donate part of their money, their salaries, to AWI, and I basically got to play Santa Claus. Like, we'd have people apply, and they would be like, I'm a veteran, I did this and that, and I need this. And they were just like, yeah, we have the money, make it happen. And it's like house remodels, I think they gave away almost 52 service dogs last year.
Man, those get me every time.
Yeah, and it's like every one of those are changing a life. And it was just an amazing company to work for, amazing time of my life. And, things got busy with Ludlum with writing. I realized I was going to have to go full time, and they were kind enough to they just were so supportive about that. Just can't say enough about that company.
Yeah, man, I'd bawl my eyes out every time they would offer up a service dog and they would show the video of the person receiving it. I mean, that just hit me so hard every single time I saw that.
And I got to work with, Karen Vaughn. Her son was on SEAL Team 6. She's one of the speakers, and man, she has such a story. Like, I swear I've probably heard it, I don't know, more times than I can count. And I know what's going to happen, and I still am just like, I got to go. There's something on.
Damn asthma, yeah.
Yeah, it's just such a great organization.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Hey, you survived our first round of this interview. Do you know what's coming next?
You're here.
I don't know.
All right. That's excellent, because we don't want you to.
Oh.
Next up is something called the lightning round. This is where you're going to be asked a series of questions from these fine gentlemen.
And Eric.
And we're hoping that you don't think too hard about your answer, because we didn't think about the questions that we wrote. So I'm going to start, and this may throw you off a bit, so we're going to tax your brain here. My first question is you have to get rid of one tattoo. Which one is it?
Well, I only have one. It just kind of goes on forever. I don't know. I mean,
the Ace of Spades.
I like that.
No, I need that one.
I do like that one.
I don't know. We can go with the dragon with the backwards tooth. I don't know if you guys can see that.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, the guy. We can get rid of that. He's kind of snaggletooth. Then we can get another one.
All right. Yeah. You get the proper teeth on that. All right. Number 2. Do you believe you could pull off a successful bank heist?
Yes.
I bet you could.
No
With the
question.
JT giving you information.
I might not have plans for that already. No,
Erase my history on my search engine.
yeah.
All right. Number 3. During an average day behind the wheel on the road, how many other drivers do you kill in your head?
All of them.
Then why is the traffic so bad in Memphis? All right.
In his head.
I'm not driving enough, I guess.
Get in the road more. All right. Number 4. What's your favorite caliber?
Pistol or rifle?
You have to pick one, my man.
I don't think it's like Sophie's choice.
I know.
I mean, it's like, What's your favorite Beatles song? Like, I would say
Golden Slumbers medley.
If we're talking about pistol, you can't beat a 9mm.
Right. All right. Well then, okay. Let's do the second one. What's your rifle cartridge?
260 Remington.
Oh, okay. That's for deer hunting, isn't it?
Well, it's for anything you want to. Ask Brad Taylor.
Got it. All right. Number 5. What famous military engagement before you were born would you have liked to have participated in?
Man, I think jumping into Normandy would have been dope, or Bridge Too Far. What was it? Can't remember. You know,
Is that
the
Market
movie,
Garden?
Market Garden.
That'd have been cool, but I'll take what you got.
All right. That's my 5.
Speaking of tattoos, what was your first one and how old were you?
I don't. I think my first one, I started getting tattoos in the Army, and I think my first one was maybe I have like this like cross rifles with the parachute. I think that was my first one. And I was like maybe like 22 or something. Yeah, I've had to like get it redone a couple times, but yeah, I think that was my first one.
So the best barbecue in Memphis is where?
Best barbecue. What type of barbecue are we talking? We talking ribs? We talking pulled pork? We
No, see, it's all different now.
It is all different. Let's go with the best ribs in Memphis.
Man. I'm gonna have to say the best ribs in Memphis are Corky's. Their dry rub is amazing.
Somebody else said that. Was that Graney?
Probably Mark, yeah.
It's pretty good. And like, if you ask Don Bentley, he wouldn't know. He'd be like, what are we talking about? Like beef barbecue? Like,
he's a vegetarian. Yeah.
His idea of barbecue is like the McRib from McDonald's. But
Can we start spreading that he is a vegetarian?
Yeah, he's a vegetarian, I think. Yeah.
Whole Foods, the hot bar at Whole Foods has them, guys.
We're trying to get you an endorsement deal with Corky's, so we'll make sure we tag them in this.
Ribs for life.
Man, it's like Corky's and Texas Pete, man. Like Texas Pete, like I really do put it on everything, and like Corky's, I can do the same way.
Oh, now I'm starving.
Yeah.
So Mark Graney stops by on Friday night, and he brings what to eat and what to drink.
Mark Graney shows up on. I don't know. He's like, I guess it really depends on what day it is. If he's, he's gotten like shredded, so he eats very clean now. So like,
that's pretty disgusting. I know.
Yeah, he'd probably show up with like some lettuce and like one of those green smoothie drinks or whatever.
Alfalfa or whatever.
No, he's a big beer guy. He's got, he always is turning me on to some beer that I've never heard of. Like but he loves Texas beers. Like every time you go over there, he's going to have like, Longhorn or Del Sol or whatever, like,
Lone Star.
I was like, for me, it's like candy is dandy, but liquor is quicker. So I don't need the carbs.
That's too funny. So you have a choice. You can either go mountain biking with Kyle Mills or you can go skiing with Jack Carr.
Is he choosing between authors or the activities?
The activity. But
yes.
That's their go-to activities that they enjoy.
I don't know. Like a lot of people just start skiing, end up like paralyzed, or I'm going to go with Kyle Mills because I could ride a bike. Like, there's something scary about
I'm with you, brother.
Sonny Bono, man.
Tree.
I live in Colorado, and I hear stories almost every week from the mountains just down the street from me. It's like, no thanks.
Jack is a crazy dude. So I can't imagine, like, skiing with him would be cool. Like, legit, he sends me this text message. This is a true story. He sends me this text message one day, and, like, I just got back from Montana. I was doing some research for a book, and I sent him, like, there was a bunch of, like, deer out there. So I was out there, like, you know, grunting at them. My brother takes this video, and, you know, they're sitting there looking at me or whatever. So I sent it to Jack Carr, and I'm like, check this out. And it was, I didn't even think about it. I was like, I shouldn't ever say check this out to Jack Carr. But I did. You know what this dude sends me back? Hand to God.
A bear
This guy sends me back a video from his phone in the Yukon of a grizzly bear coming at him, and he is clicking at the bear. He's like, come here, girl. And the bear is coming at him, and he's like, oh. I'm like, dude, whatever. Like, there goes my mad card. Like, that's what I did. Like, you know, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. I was like, yeah, you win. Like, my deer, your bear.
There's brass balls and then there's brass balls.
Oh, look,
you're like
so cute.
Author. What happens if that thing had a bad day? He's like,
The bear's gonna have a bad day.
I have a feeling Jack was probably well armed to take care of it if he got too close.
He's like, you know, they're gonna start making jokes like, you know, Chuck Norris jokes.
Yeah, Jack Carr jokes.
So it's funny you say that. So speaking of bears, our very own Sharon Cameron has wrestled a bear. True story. What's the stupidest thing Josh Hood's ever done?
Today?
I'd prefer not today unless it's a really good story.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Man.
Sean didn't wrestle the bear today, so what have you stupidest thing done in your life?
That's a tough question. Let me see. One time when I was in Afghanistan, and I'm pretty sure, like, I can't get in trouble, we had these laser range finders, and we're out on the range just screwing around. I don't know why. I thought it'd be a good idea to laze a Harrier coming into to land at Kandahar. Did not realize that when you shoot an Helios laser at a Harrier or any type of military jet, it assumes it's getting painted by a surface-to-air missile. That was like one of the worst decisions that I've made up to that date. And it was like right there for God and everybody. This thing just flared and chaff going everywhere. It's like they look down at Sergeant Hood, and he's the only dumbass holding the, you know, a laser rangefinder up at this thing. And it was like, man, I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe it was the heat. But that was pretty stupid.
That was a good one.
The poor pilot probably just like mustered out like the next day.
Dude, that guy, like, looking back on it, it was like, I'd been in country, I guess, a little bit too long, wasn't making good life choices, but like, that dude turned and burned, and I was just like, oh, that escalated quickly.
Too funny.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
You're up,
So,
Sean.
like, if you watch this show, I'm sorry.
Sorry, nobody's gonna watch this show, so don't worry about it.
Well, that's
Not true.
so. Kyle Mills has a background as a carpenter. He's agreed to build me a chair. Narrator says no, he hasn't. But will you build me a desk, and how much? Because you built your desk, right?
I did build a desk. I'm sure I could build you a desk, and I just said it to you. As long as you pay the freight, I'll send you a desk.
All right. You guys heard
that
it.
cardboard boy.
Okay, so we actually kind of talked about this earlier. My other question was, or my next question was, most daring 82nd Airborne operation: Normandy, Market Garden, the Bulge, or just like Sicily and Italy prior to that?
Most daring. I don't know, because you got like different phases of when like things happen. So like if you look at like the Anzio landing and all that stuff, like nobody really talks about that. But those dudes, like the 3504, like was combat ineffective after that. And then, you know, you go into Normandy, and they had a lot of, I mean, they were like kind of the special operations dudes back then, but you know, those guys, you read the book, like there's a book that I've read a couple times called Night Drop, and like they're talking about like their pilots aren't slowing down, they're losing their bags down there with nods. And then you got Market Garden, which was like another thing where it's like, you guys should never have been here. So I think like all of them were pretty daring. I think the dumbest one was like Operation was the linebacker. Like there was really no real need to do it.
Right.
They did it and got kind of just spanked a little bit, and it was just it was one of those things. Like I think they were all daring, but I think like Operation Linebacker would have been kind of hairy because you're like, I'm about to go home, and they're like, where are all these Germans come? Where'd they come from?
We'll edit that. So I asked, what was the dumbest drop in that way? Okay. What extremely wise woman said the only way to make money writing is to write a ransom note?
Oh, my mom said that, and my grandmother, I think, said that too. And they're wrong. I've proved you wrong, but
yeah, that was. I'm sure that's one of those where they're happy to be proven wrong.
Yeah.
So you worked in conjunction with the FBI, the ATF, the DEA, the Secret Service, and the U.S. Marshals. Who are the biggest cowboys?
Here comes the story.
I would probably say the DEA, like those guys, like, the FBI, the Secret Service are, as you could attest, they're pretty straight-laced people. Like the FBI especially. The ATF, they're kind of like, I don't really know what they do. I mean, I know it has something to do with alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, but they're just kind of like, they just do their thing. But the DEA, like, it's just kind of like, hey, here's, they're after the Holy Trinity, like money, dope, and guns. We're going to crash some cars, and there's probably going to be a foot chase. And you're like, okay, sounds like a party. Let's go.
And the Marshals are kind of a mix of the others. Would you say that?
Yeah, I mean, the Marshals are like, like when the Marshals call you, like something's really bad. So it's like, oh, the Marshals are calling. And they're like, they're either like lazy, which is, I've never seen it, or they're just like, hey, could you go get this guy? And you're like, you are the U.S. Marshals. Like, who is this guy that you're calling me to come? Like, oh, don't worry about it. He's fine. Real nice guy. We're just really busy. And they're laughing in the background as you're stacking on the
You send your SWAT team.
All right, my final question. You can live 1 month, and live is keyword, as any fictional character in film or literature. Who is it?
I think being Court Gentry would be pretty legit because, like, that dude's funny.
Amen, brother.
That dude's, like, very, very funny, and, like, I want to hang out with Court Gentry if he's a real dude.
Yeah.
2 of the 4 of us are probably the biggest Gray Man fans.
Absolutely.
Mike and myself.
My favorite for sure.
And I actually was talking to Mark the other day, and I told him, I said, the first person of the new book, I said, his internal monologue is exactly how I imagined it based on the prior books, which was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to, like, be on his junk or whatever. Like, he's a great writer, or, but he's, like, the only dude. Like, not too long ago, I started, I do the Audible where you get 2 free. And so I hadn't read his first one in, like, a long time. So I'm in the gym listening to his book. And, like, literally, it was that one. And then the second one, I was hunting, too. I'm like in a tree stand, and it's just like, they're laughing. Like, it's funny. And I was like, Mark, man, and there's some things that he says, like I asked him, like, there's certain passages in the first 2 books, I was like, you wouldn't write that now, would you? And he's like, hell no, I wouldn't. It's, like, really funny. And it's just, but there's other great funny writers out there also.
Yeah.
They're just not a Penguin.
So Joshua just wrote a children's book. What's the title?
Joshua, It would probably be, why won't you eat your food, Jake?
Yep, that's a good one. So you're in Wuhan, China, and the Chinese government has just quarantined the city. No one in, no one out. You hunker down and hope for the best, or do you make a run for it?
I'm running.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Me too.
And so Memphis will now be infected with the Wuhan virus.
Hey, man.
Happens.
Every man for himself.
Nowhere not to go for barbecue.
Yeah, I don't know, but, like, I can't think of anything worse than, like, hunkering down in China.
My gosh, yeah. No.
Like it's cold. I don't like the cold. So
Unless you like frogs, live frogs.
Bats or mice. But anyway, you get to play a character on Seinfeld. Anyone. You get to pick one. Who is it?
Kramer.
You're Kramer.
Kramer. No explanation needed.
Nope. And so my next two are somewhat literary. Spell rendezvous.
I think of it as Ron Devis, so it's RENDEVOUS.
Missed one. So close.
RENDEZVOUS.
That's right.
There you go.
Damn Z.
Well, I'm not reading this book now. Forget it.
I got spell check. Okay.
And so my last one, my 7-year-old daughter has been asking me this question every single day for the last week. What's the plural of octopus?
Octopi.
It's acceptable.
Okay.
Octopi,
that.
octopuses, or octopods. Go figure.
Really?
Wow, I've never heard that before.
Me either.
Strange.
That is it.
All right.
By the way, the next book will be the Treadstone Rendezvous.
Ron Devis without the Z.
Did we just release the next title? Awesome. Sweet.
Here's me.
Hey, you survived, my man. Good job.
Awesome. Good times.
So we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for coming on the show. Thanks for your service to the country and your community. And man, I can't wait for the book to come out for everybody else to read, because this was one of my favorites. Oh, this is such a great book, guys.
I'm glad you like it. And, I'm just.
I didn't just like it.
No,
be
awesome.
here. And, I really appreciate what you guys do. Like, contrary to popular belief, it's like, authors aren't like the most interesting people in the world. Like, we sit in a room in front, like, we're basically like, some would construe authors as nerds and whatever.
Yeah.
And so, to find, to be able to talk about what we love doing, the genre, and where we think it's going to go with people that appreciate it and share it with people that appreciate it, it's, just really refreshing. And I know a lot of guys feel the same way as I do. And it's just cool. Like, you guys kind of just set this up on like your initiative. Like, hey, we like this. Let's talk about this. And
yeah.
the questions you ask, the light that you bring to it is just amazing. Big fan.
Thanks.
Appreciate it, man.
We're all fans first.
The
Every
key,
writer's
really,
a fan.
the key is this.
Yeah.
Everything's much more interesting with it.
Yeah, you add booze and you add great books. This shit doesn't get any better than that.
What could go wrong?
Yeah.
Maybe some guns, whatever. But
Yeah.
it's like, you guys offer something that's just very fresh, and the questions are always right on. It's laid back, and it's like, hey, we know. I think at least I know, like, you're not gonna have me on if it sucks. So I know when you're like, hey, good. We're like, all right. The day you don't call me for an interview is the day I'm like, hey, what I do wrong with this?
No. Next book.
Yeah.
We'll wait for the next one.
Good. We're booked up.
Everybody buy this book.
Yeah,
Absolutely. This is a fantastic read. I loved it. It took me 2 days and I was done with this baby.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
That was all Tom Colgan.
He's a good man. Well,
Yeah.
here's toast to you there, Josh. Appreciate you coming on today.
Appreciate it. Y'all have a great night.
Take care. The boys of the crew want to extend a huge thanks to Josh for spending time with us today. Treadstone Resurrection is an amazing book, and we can't recommend it highly enough. As my illustrious co-host and dear friend says, so go out and buy it. I also want to thank you, our viewers and listeners, for your continued support as we bring the very best authors every Monday to the Crew Reviews. Without you, none of this is possible. So now, I'd like to raise a toast to Mr. Josh Hood and the crew. Thanks for coming on. Great show, boys.
Great show.
Great show,
Always.
great guy.
Take care.
And great book.
Buy it
Do it. Get it.
right now.